Unusual and strange court cases. The case against the church for praying for rain. In the 1880s, a Presbyterian minister named Duncan MacLeod organized a mass prayer session to take place on a Saturday in August in the hope of ending a drought in New York State. At noon, people throughout the area stopped their activities and prayed for rain. By 1 o'clock, clouds had appeared, by 2, a gusty wind was blowing, by 3, the temperature had dropped 20 degrees, and by 4, a thunderstorm had arrived. The storm, which dropped almost 2 inches of rain, washed out a bridge and completely destroyed a barn, which burned to the ground after being struck by lightning. As it happened, the barn belonged to Phineas Dodd, the only farmer in Phelps, New York, who had refused to join the collective prayer. Many thought that Dodd had been a victim of divine justice, but Dodd had other ideas. When he heard that Reverend MacLeod was taking credit for the rain and having ended the drought, he sued the church father for $5,000 to cover the damages to his property. The minister was in a difficult situation, as he had repeatedly told his followers that God had answered their prayers. How could he go back on his words and admit that the storm was just a coincidence? Fortunately for MacLeod, his lawyer was able to convince the judge that the mass prayers had requested rain only and that the thunder and lightning had been a bonus provided by God for which MacLeod and his parishioners were not responsible. The judge accepted this argument and dismissed Dodd's case. A compensation case for transforming into a nymphomaniac. The case of Gloria Sykes is exceptional in history. This case was filed in San Francisco in 1970. A college graduate from Dearborn Heights, Michigan, the 23-year-old Sykes was a religious girl. She had a cable car accident when the Hyde Street cable car lost its grip and plunged backward, throwing Sykes against a pole. She suffered 2 black eyes and several bruises, but worst of all, according to her lawyer, she was transformed into a nymphomaniac. Although she had normal sex exposure in the past, but now she had become insatiable after the accident and once engaged in sexual intercourse 50 times in 5 days. This unusual behavior led her to sue the municipal railway for $500,000 for physical injuries and emotional disturbances. The jury of 8 women and 4 men was very sympathetic to her and awarded Sykes a judgment of $50,000. Suing the devil. Gerald Mayo, a 22-year-old inmate at Western Penitentiary in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, filed a claim before the United States District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania, in which he alleged that Satan had on numerous occasions caused plaintiff misery in unwarranted threats, against the will of plaintiff. Satan had placed deliberate obstacles in his path, caused the plaintiff's downfall, and therefore, deprived him of his constitutional rights in violation of the United States Code. Mayo decided to file a lawsuit against Satan and his minions, which was an external force over which the prison had no control. The court noted that Satan was a foreign prince, so he could claim sovereign immunity from suit. However, on December 3, Mayo's complaint was denied on the ground that the defendant did not reside in Pennsylvania. Filing of case 167 years late. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 was a land deal between the United States and France in which the USA acquired approximately 827,000 square miles of land west of the Mississippi River for $15 million. In 1976, Cecilia M. Pizzo, a lady, filed a suit in New Orleans to nullify the Louisiana Purchase, which had doubled the size of the United States in 1803. Pizzo claimed that neither Napoleon nor Thomas Jefferson had the authority to make the deal and that the 8 million acre land still belonged to Spain. Judge Jack M. Gordon ruled that the assertion might be true because only the French Parliament and the U.S. Congress had the legal right to engage in negotiations, not Thomas Jefferson and Napoleon, but regrettably, plaintiff Cecilia Pizzo had filed her suit 167 years after the statute of limitations, which gives only 6 years time period to file such cases. On this basis, the judge dismissed the case. The case of the misplaced corpse. Mrs. Beatrice Daigle, aged 73, a resident of Woonsocket, USA, filed a $250,000 suit when she claimed that she had been praying at the wrong grave for 17 years. After her husband died on January 28, 1961, the Church of the Precious Blood in Woonsocket sold Mrs. Daigle a plot at St. John the Baptist Cemetery in Bellingham, Massachusetts. Mrs. Daigle visited the grave frequently to pray for the repose of her dead husband's soul. On April 26, 1978, workers opened the grave to move Mr. Daigle's body to another plot and discovered instead the body of a woman, Jean Champagne. 3 more graves had to be dug up before Mr. Daigle's body was located. Mrs. Daigle, who was present at the exhumation, suffered severe emotional trauma and distress because of the mistake. In November 1979, her case was dismissed. The curious case of monkeys' selfies. Between 2011 and 2018, a series of disputes took place about the copyright status of selfies taken by Celebes crested macaques named Naruto using equipment belonging to the British wildlife photographer David J. Slater. Celebes crested macaques are old-world monkeys that live on the few islands of Indonesia, particularly the island of Sulawesi. The disputes involved Wikimedia Commons and the blog TechDirt, which hosted the images following their publication in newspapers in July 2011, over Slater's objections that he holds the copyright. In 2014, the Wikimedia Foundation refused to remove the pictures from its Wikimedia Commons image library and argued that copyright is held by the creator, that a non-human creator, not being a legal person, cannot hold copyright, and that the images are thus in the public domain. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, also jumped in the foray and sued on behalf of Naruto, claiming the monkey should own the copyright, and thus tried to use the monkey selfies case to establish a legal precedent that animals should be declared copyright owners and they should be appointed to administer proceeds from the photos for the endangered species benefit. In December 2014, the United States Copyright Office stated that works created by a non-human, such as a photograph taken by a monkey, are not copyrightable. A federal district court ruled that a monkey cannot own copyright under U.S. law and dismissed PETA's case. In April 2018, the appeals court ruled against PETA in its judgment that animals cannot legally hold copyrights and expressed concern that PETA's motivations had been to promote their own interests rather than to protect the legal rights of the monkeys. The case of displaced belly button. Virginia O'Hare, aged 42, a resident of New York, filed a malpractice suit against plastic surgeon Howard Bellin after her navel ended up 2 inches off-center following surgery in November 1974, to give her a flat, sexy belly. Dr. Bellin had previously performed successful operations on O'Hare's nose and eyelids. Bellin argued that O'Hare's navel, which was later returned to its proper position by another plastic surgeon, had only been misplaced by a half-inch, which he called not cosmetically unacceptable. In May 1979, a state Supreme Court jury awarded O'Hare $854,219, including $100,000 for pain and suffering, $4,219 for the corrective surgery, and $750,000 for loss of earnings. Not surprisingly, Dr. Bellin appealed the verdict but later agreed to pay Mrs. O'Hare $200,000. CocaCola paid cost of obstructing love. Amanda Blake of Northampton was working with the Coca-Cola bottling company for 8 years. In 1985, CocaCola discovered that she had fallen in love with and become engaged to David Cronin, who had left Coke to work for Pepsi. She was ordered either to break off her engagement with Cronin, persuade him to quit his job with Pepsi, or quit her job with the Coca-Cola bottling company. She refused to comply with any of the above suggestions. Ultimately, she was fired for conflict of interest. Amanda filed a suit against her employer and sought $600,000 in damages from the Coca-Cola bottling company for firing her unethically. After a protracted legal battle, a settlement was finally reached between both parties. The exact amount was not disclosed by any party, but it is generally believed the settlement amount was substantial. The Big Spin. On December 30, 1985, Doris Barnett of Los Angeles appeared on television to try her luck at the California Lottery's Big Spin. Barnett spun the lottery wheel and watched as her balls settled into the $3 million slot. Show host Jeff Edwards threw his hands in the air and shouted $3 million. Barnett's children rushed out of the audience and joined her in celebration, whooping and jumping for joy. Then Edwards tapped Barnett on the shoulder and turned her attention back to the wheel. The ball had slipped out of the $3 million slot and into the $10,000 slot. Edwards explained that lottery rules required the ball to stay in the slot for 5 seconds. Barnett was hustled off stage, but she did not go meekly. She sued the California Lottery. In 1989, after watching endless videos of other contestants being declared winners in less than 5 seconds, a jury awarded Barnett $3 million as well as an extra $400,000 in damages for emotional trauma. But the California Lottery didn't go smoothly either. They refused to pay the amount. Eventually, a mutually satisfactory settlement was reached, with the agreement that the amount would not be made public. Husband sues wife over ugly baby. The boy meets a pretty girl, and they marry and end up having a child together. However, this tale does not have such a happy ending. Jian Feng from China saw his newborn daughter and asked why she was incredibly ugly and did not look like either parent. He accused his wife of cheating on him. At that point, she admitted that she was ugly herself, and she had several plastic surgeries to become beautiful. He sued her on the grounds of false pretenses, claiming she misled him by hiding her cosmetic surgery history. He won the case, and his wife was made to pay him more than $120,000. The Trial of a Corpse. One of the most bizarre trials in history was the Cadaver Synod. The Cadaver Synod, also called the Cadaver Trial, is the name commonly given to the ecclesiastical trial of Pope Formosus, who had been dead for about 7 months, in Rome during January 897. The trial was conducted by future Pope Stephen VI on the orders of Pope Formosus' successor Pope Boniface VI. Stephen had Formosus' corpse exhumed and brought to the papal court for judgment. The Cadaver Synod and related events took place during a period of political instability in Italy. This period, which lasted from the middle of the 9th century to the middle of the 10th century, was marked by a rapid succession of popes. Between 872 and 965, 24 popes were appointed, and between 896 and 904, there was a new pope every year. Often, these brief papal reigns were the result of the political machinations of local Roman factions. Formosus became Bishop of Porto Santa Rufina in 864, during the pontificate of Pope Nicholas I. In 866, he was sent as a legate to Bulgaria. He was so successful in this position that the Bulgarian ruler Boris I asked the Pope to appoint him Archbishop of Bulgaria. Nicholas refused to give permission, because the 15th canon of the Second Council of Nicaea forbade it to appoint a bishop in 2 places. In 875, Formosus fled Rome in fear of then-Pope John VIII, who was against his ambitions. A few months later, in 876, at a synod in Santa Maria Rotunda, John VIII issued a series of accusations against Formosus and some of his associates. He asserted that Formosus had corrupted the minds of the Bulgarians so that, so long as Formosus was alive, they would not accept any other bishop. Later, Formosus was excommunicated. After the death of John VIII in December 882, Formosus' troubles ended. He resumed his bishopric at Porto, where he remained until he was elected pope on October 6, 891. Yet this earlier quarrel with John VIII formed the basis of the accusations made at the Cadaver Synod. Stephen VI asked his corpse why he had tried to seize the papal throne from Pope John VIII. Formosus, being several months dead, could not answer. He was accused of perjury, of having acceded to the papacy illegally. At the end of the trial, Formosus was pronounced guilty, and his papacy was declared null and void retrospectively. The corpse was stripped of its papal vestments, and Stephen VI then cut off the 3 fingers of the right hand that it had used in life for blessings, formally invalidating all of Formosus' acts and ordinations. The body was finally interred in a graveyard that was meant for foreigners, only to be dug up once again, tied to weights, and cast into the Tiber River.